Welcome to A Year in the Bible with Daily Grace. The Bible tells one big story of redemption, and we want to spend 5 minutes every day journeying through the Bible from start to finish and exploring how all of it points to Jesus.
Hey everyone, welcome back to A Year in the Bible with Daily Grace. My name is Aubrey Coleman, one of the hosts for the podcast, and today we're looking at 2 Kings chapters 13 through 15. King Jehoahaz ruled Samaria for 17 years. He was not a righteous king. Instead, he followed in the footsteps of Jeroboam, who was responsible for Israel's sin. Because of Jehoahaz's evil nature, God made him and Israel subject to Hazael, the king of Syria, and to his son. Nevertheless, Jehoahaz did pray to God for relief, and God heard his prayers and provided some. After Jehoahaz's reign, his son, Jehoash, became king in his place. This name sounds very similar to the king of Judah in the last chapter, Joash. They are very easy to get confused, so be careful not to get it mixed up here. Jehoash was very disobedient to the Lord during his reign, and he was king for 16 years. Elisha then entered abruptly back into this chapter. At the time, he fell very ill. Before he eventually died from his illness, he told King Jehoash that he would defeat Syria. The chapter actually ends by noting Israel's continued oppression from Syria and how God showed compassion on them because of his covenant promises. Jehoash eventually was able to recover cities Syria had taken from Israel according to Elisha's prophecy. Chapter 14 introduces us to King Amaziah of Judah, who succeeded his father Joash, and ruled 29 years in Jerusalem and did what was right in the sight of the Lord. When he became king, he killed the servants who overthrew and killed his father. Next, he went to war with Edom and won. Then, overzealous from his victory, he wanted to settle some beef with the king of Israel, Jehoash, the guy who has a similar name to his father, and invited him to a battle. Jehoash warned Amaziah that Judah would be put to shame, but King Amaziah wouldn't listen. They went to war, and Judah ended up fleeing for their lives, and King Amaziah was forced to hand over valuable resources. Jehoash eventually died, and Jeroboam II took his place. Amaziah lived another 15 years, and his reign ended similarly to his father's in that he was conspired against and murdered. His son, Azariah, took his place. Jeroboam II was just as awful as Jeroboam I. He did much of the same things that Jeroboam I did, but he also made some admirable decisions, like protecting his people from the oppression of other nations. But all was orchestrated by the sovereign hand of the Lord to protect the nation of Israel. Jeroboam II ruled 41 years, and his son Zechariah took over. Now, King Azariah and King Zechariah are very different kings. King Azariah mostly obeyed God and did what was right in the eyes of the Lord like his father, except that he continued to allow the worship of other gods, and therefore God inflicted him with leprosy in his later years. King Zechariah was evil and did evil in the Lord's sight. He lasted a mere 6 months as king before he was conspired against and killed by a man named Shallum, who took his throne. Shallum only lasted a month before he was murdered by Menahem of Tirzah, who then took his throne. Menahem then killed the entire town because no one would surrender and submit to him. He was horribly evil and ruled for 10 years. He was succeeded by his son, Pekahiah, who only ruled for 2 years and displeased the Lord his entire reign. He was conspired against by Pekah and killed, and Pekah took his throne as king of Samaria. You may have guessed it. He too was evil and ruled for 20 years. He, like many before him, was conspired against and killed by a man named Hoshea, who took his throne. On the other hand, during this time, Jotham was king of Judah, and he did what was right in the sight of the Lord. Do you notice the two storylines here? On one hand, we have the kings of Israel who are increasingly more wicked over time. They conspire and murder for power, only to be conspired against and murdered for the same reason. They disregarded the Lord and did evil in his sight. On the other hand, we have the kings of Judah who have a little bit more hope on their end. They seem to have hit more of a streak in these chapters of kings who sought to please the Lord and do right in his eyes. Their lineage was by no means perfect, but God's hand was clearly over them. Whether we find our leaders to be evil or righteous, God remains in control. He is not limited by human authority, and he will accomplish what he sets out to do. The kings of Israel and Judah come and go. The same problems remain. Israel needs a true and perfect king, a king who would not only perfectly do right in the eyes of the Lord and lead his people away from sin, but a king who takes on their sin in order to set them free from it. And we know that no amount of evil or death could stop God from providing the perfect king, King Jesus, who is seated on his throne in the heavens, interceding for his people both now and forevermore. Thank you so much for joining us again today, and be sure to follow along on our Instagram pages at Daily Grace Podcast and at The Daily Grace Co. You can always find more resources to accompany the podcast at dailygracepodcast.com. And if you enjoyed today's episode, we would so appreciate if you left us a rating or review on iTunes to help more people find out about our show. Thank you so much, and we look forward to chatting again with you tomorrow.